Hello and welcome to Algebra 2 Practice Set 36. In this video, we're going to look at some additional practice problems for our lesson on special products. All right, so we just want to use the special products formulas to find each product. So we're going to start out with the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 1. So we know that if we see the same thing in the position here and here, right, the first position of each, the same thing in the position here and here, the second position of each, and we have a plus and a minus sign, we're going to end up with the difference of two squares. So we simply take the first guy, which is x, and we square it. And then we're going to subtract away the second guy, which is 1 squared. 1 squared is just 1. So this ends up being x squared minus 1. So for this next problem, it's very similar. We have the quantity 2n minus 2 times the quantity 2n plus 2. Same thing here and here. Same thing here and here. Different signs. Right, so what I want to do is take the first guy, which is 2n, and square it. Now I need to square the 2 and the n. So you might want to take an extra step and say it's 2n like this squared, then minus whatever's in the second position, which is 2, and we're going to square that. So if I square 2, I get 4. If I square n, I get n squared. So 4n squared minus 2 squared is 4. So we end up with 4n squared minus 4. All right, for the next one, we have the quantity negative 3m plus 5n times the quantity negative 3m minus 5n. So I have the same thing here and here. I have the same thing here and here. And I have different signs. I have a plus and I have a minus. Now, what's important is you notice that when I circled the first term, I circled the negative and the 3m. Okay, so you've got to use that in your calculation. I want negative 3m, that amount squared. If I squared negative 3m, the negative and the 3 would be squared. Negative 3 squared is 9. M squared is m squared. So I can write this as 9m squared. 9m squared. Then minus, I take the second guy squared. 5n squared. Remember, you're squaring 5, which is 25, and n, which is n squared. So I'm going to end up here with 9m squared minus 25n squared. All right, so let's take a look at another one like that. So we have the quantity negative 6y cubed minus 10x times the quantity negative 6y cubed plus 10x. So again, I've got the same thing here and here. I've got the same thing here and here. And I've got different signs. I've got a minus here. I've got a plus here. So again, I'm going to square this first term. I'm including that negative, so you need to make sure you do that. If I squared negative 6, I'd have positive 36. If I squared y cubed, you'd keep y the same. 3 times 2 would give me 6. Then minus the second guy here squared. So 10 squared is 100. X squared is just x squared. So we end up with 36y to the 6th power minus 100x squared. All right, now let's look at some problems that deal with the square of a binomial. So you'll recall that the pattern for this, if I have x plus y, that quantity squared, it's the first guy x squared plus 2 times the first guy times the second guy. So 2 times x times y plus the last guy y squared. And if I run into the quantity x minus y squared, everything is the same except for this sign in front of the second term. In front of the second term, it's negative 2xy, but everything else is the same. So to kind of match this up, if I have 3n plus 2, that quantity squared, I'm going to take the first guy, which is 3n, and square it. So 3 squared is 9. If I square n, I get n squared. Then plus, I would have 2 times 3n times 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. So I'd have 12 times n, or just 12n. Then lastly, plus the last guy, which is 2 squared. 2 squared is going to give me 4. So this ends up giving me 9n squared plus 12n plus 4. So let's say we look at the quantity 4x to the 5th power plus 8z squared, and this is squared. Again, I want to take this first guy, which is 4x to the 5th power, and square it. That means I'm going to square 4, which is 16, and I'm going to square x to the 5th power. So x would stay the same, and you'd multiply exponents. 5 times 2 is 10. So I'd have x to the 10th power. Then next, I'd put plus. You'd have 2 times the first guy times the second guy. So let's just think about 2 times 4, which is 8. Then times 8 again, which would be 64. Then times x to the 5th power. then times z squared. Then lastly, I'd have plus. If I square the second guy, 8 squared would be 64. Z squared squared would be z to the 4th power, right? Z stays the same. Multiply the exponents. 2 times 2 would be 4. So I end up with 16x to the 10th power plus 64x to the 5th power z squared plus 64z to the 4th power. All right, for the next one, we have the quantity 5x cubed minus 10y squared, and this is squared. So what I want to do, again, I want this first guy squared. So if I squared 5, I'd have 25. If I squared x cubed, I'd have x to the power of 6, right? You keep x the same, multiply 3 times 2, you get 6. Then minus, okay? When you have a minus sign in this formula, remember your second term will have a minus out in front. So I'm going to have 2 times 5x cubed times 10y squared. So 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 10 is 100. So let's put 100. And then times x cubed, and then times y squared. Then lastly, I'm going to have plus. I'm going to square this guy. So 10 squared is 100. Y squared squared is y to the 4th power. Keep y the same. Multiply exponents. 2 times 2 is 4. So I end up with 25x to the 6th power minus 100x cubed y squared plus 100y to the 4th power. All right, let's take a look at one more of these. So if I had the quantity negative 6x to the 4th power minus 4y squared, and this was squared. Now, in this particular case, we have a negative for our first position, okay? So I've got to make sure that I'm squaring this. Let me kind of write this out. So I would have negative 6x to the 4th power. That whole thing would be squared, okay? Then minus, okay? Minus in front of the second term that you have. So minus 2 times this guy. So 2 times negative 6x to the 4th power times this guy, 4y squared. Again, I include the sign here, but I don't include this here. Okay, very important you understand that. This sign is already pre-configured for us. Okay, so we never have to include that. All right, then plus, I want this guy here, this 4y squared, to be squared. So let's crank this out. If I have negative 6 squared, that's positive 36. X to the 4th power squared, x stays the same. 4 times 2 is 8. Then for this one, I have negative 2 times negative 6x to the 4th power times 4y squared. So negative times negative is positive. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 times 4 is 48. So you'd have 48 x to the 4th power y squared. Then lastly, you'd have plus 4 squared is 16. Y squared squared is y to the 4th power. Keep y the same. Multiply exponents. 2 times 2 is 4. So I end up with 36x to the 8th power plus 48x to the 4th power y squared plus 16y to the 4th power. All right, now let's look at some cubes of a binomial. So if I took a binomial and raised it to the 3rd power, what's the formula for that? Well, typically we think about this with x plus y, that quantity cubed, or we also see x minus y, that quantity cubed. So these two are going to be the same. The only difference will be some signs, okay? So for the first one here, everything is positive. We end up with x cubed, and we have y cubed out here. So this is the first thing I always remember. You have plus, and you have plus. You have a section where you have 2 middle terms. So the exponents are 3. So this is how I remember the 2 middle terms. 3 times this guy times this guy. So 3 times x times y, 3 times x times y. Now, that's not the actual formula. What you want to do is you want to square one of them in each case. So in this case, I'm going to square x. In this case, I'm going to square y. Now, that's how I remember it. One of them is squared, one of them is not. For this one, it's the same thing, okay? The signs are going to be different in 2 places. So in front of the second term and the 4th term, you have minus signs. Then in front of the 3rd term, we put a plus. All right, so let's see if we can transfer this to this. So looking at my formula, I know that I want the first guy and the second guy to be cubed. That's going to be at each end. So if I cubed 2x, 2 cubed would be 8. X cubed would just be x cubed. I'd put plus. I'll have two terms in the middle here. And then the last term will be 7 cubed. So 7 cubed is 343. Now, what goes in the two middle terms? Again, you think about the exponent 3. It's 3 times 2x times 7 in each case, but I've got to square 1 in each case. So let me put 3 times 2x times 7, 3 times 2x times 7. Now, in each case, I'm squaring one of them, and one of them is not going to be squared. So I'm going to square 2x in this case. In this case, I'm going to square 7. So it's 3 times 2x times 7 with one of them squared, either 2x or 7 in each case. Okay, so one will be squared, one will not be squared in each case. That's how you remember. Let me erase this. All right. So 8x cubed, don't need to do anything with that. If I square 2x, I would have 4x squared. So I would have 3 times 4, which is 12, then times 7, which is 84. So let me put plus 84, and then you'd have x squared. Then plus, you'd have 3 times 2x times 7 squared. 7 squared is 49. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 49 is 294. And then times x. And then plus 343. So that's your answer. 8x cubed plus 84x squared plus 294x plus 343. All right, let's take a look at one final problem. So we have the quantity 3x to the fourth power minus 6y squared z cubed, and this is cubed. So again, the first position and the last position are very easy to remember. I would just take this guy and cube it. If I cube 3, I get 27. If I cube x to the fourth power, x stays the same. I multiply 4 times 3, I get 12. Then minus. You have a minus in front of the second position. You have a plus in front of the third position. You have a minus in front of the final position. Now the final position is easy to remember as well. Take this guy and cube it. If I cube 6, I get 216. If I cube y squared, I get y to the 6th power. If I cube z cubed, I get z to the 9th power. So those two are easy to remember. The middle ones are what trip people up. Again, 3 times this guy with one of them squared in each case. So let me write 3 times 3x to the fourth power times 6y squared z cubed. Now, in this case, I'm going to square this first guy. So let me square this one, but this one won't be squared. In the second case, I'm going to square this guy, but this one won't be squared. So 3 times this guy, 3x to the fourth power, won't be squared, times 6y squared z cubed, and that will be squared. All right, so let's start out with what we know. We have 27x to the 12th power. Then for this guy right here, 3 squared is 9. Let me just write this up here. This would be 9. X to the fourth power squared would be x to the 8th power. So I'm just going to erase this and put 9x to the 8th power. So you have a negative out in front, or a minus. 3 times 9 is 27. 27 times 6 is 162. Then you have x to the 8th power, y squared, z cubed. Then you have a plus. You have 3 times 3x to the 4th power times, and then this whole thing is squared, 6y squared z cubed. So if 6 was squared, you would have 36. So you would have 36. Y squared squared is y to the 4th power. Z cubed squared is z to the 6th power. So let's write that in there. This is times 36, y to the 4th, z to the 6th. So what I'd have here is plus 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 36 is 324. Then we have x to the 4th power, y to the 4th power, z to the 6th power. And then minus 216, y to the 6th, z to the 9th. So we have our answer. We've got 27x to the 12th power minus 162x to the 8th power, y squared, z cubed, plus 324x to the 4th power, y to the 4th power, z to the 6th power, minus 216 y to the 6th power, z to the 9th power.